Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome. I am 𝐂𝐎𝐍𝐈𝐍. This is the Crypto and Cognac podcast show, as always, live every Thursday, 7 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time on YouTube. Cheers and welcome. I hope you have your drink. I hope you have your notepad. I hope you have your questions, because we're going to talk about it, right? This evening, we're going to get into a little bit about layer one blockchains versus layer 2 blockchains. What the hell does that even mean? A lot of people hear about it, a lot of people talk about it, but what the hell does it actually mean? What is a L1? What is a L2? Is that a loser or two losers? I don't know. It's definitely not that. But we're going to get into it. As always, I just want to remind you guys, because we have to do the housekeeping, that nothing that I share here this evening or any evening to come or any evening that has gone by should be misconstrued as financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. So with everything that you do here, make sure everything you hear here, make sure you check with your financial advisor, make sure you check with your accountant, make sure you check with your banker, make sure you check with your spouse, make sure you check with your investment person, whoever your person is, check with your budget, right? Don't go and say 𝐿luminati say, because me not said nothing. Me just share some information, right? So, and always, as we have these spirited conversations, please remember, if you're on the road, even if you're home, drink responsibly, degen responsibly. You don't want to be clicking some unsavory links because you got a little too hyped up on that yak, right? So make sure you be safe, but make sure you have a drink, because you know how we do it in the Caribbean. We don't lime dry mouth, right? We don't have conversations dry mouth. And happy Carnival to everybody in Trinidad and Tobago, everybody who's flying in, everybody from the diaspora, everybody from Europe, everybody from Asia, everybody from Africa, everybody from Latin America who are coming to Trinidad and Tobago for Carnival. If you see me in a party, if you see me in a fete, do ask me what I'm drinking. It's always yak, every single time. It may be a different SKU, but it's always yak, right? If you really want to make me happy, hit me up with some Hennessy VSOP, right? So let's get into it. So before we even jump into what L1s or L2s are, I think an important point that we need to touch on is the idea of the blockchain trilemma. What the hell is that, right? So this was actually first coined by Vitalik Buterin, one of the co-founders of Ethereum. And basically he said that in building a blockchain, there are always three areas that you have to prioritize, or that there will be trade-offs around in order to make a successful blockchain product. Those three things are decentralization, scalability, and of course, security. And unfortunately, as at today, it is, I wouldn't say impossible, but it has not been discovered yet a way in which to ensure that these three things are available at the same level of functionality in a blockchain. And that is one of the main reasons why we see the evolution of L2s into the space, of course. So before we even get into L1s, L2s, I thought it was important that we touch on the blockchain trilemma. Again, it was coined, or it's attributed to Vitalik as being the first person to come up with this idea, right? Now, L1s versus L2s, right? So basically, layer ones represent the base blockchain protocol, right? We all know Bitcoin, we all know Ethereum, we've all gotten to know Solana. There is Phantom, there's AVAX, there's Cardano, there are a bunch of different L1s, right? Basically, what that means is the blockchain operates on, of course, one layer, right? And then layer 2 refers to protocols that are built on top of those layer 1s in order to enhance scalability, right? Because one of the things that we've seen be a significant challenge for a lot of layer 1s has been as it relates to scalability, and scalability from the perspective not of in terms of load, but in terms of affordability. It's something that we've seen recently with Ethereum. As a lot of people started using the Ethereum network, we started seeing Ethereum gas fees going out of control just because of the network effects. We saw the same thing on Bitcoin, on the Bitcoin protocol, especially when we saw ordinals being introduced, which is Bitcoin NFTs. And it's something that we have, well, we've not really seen it on Solana, but we've seen that the higher levels of activity impact mainly around the cost of using the protocol, right? So layer 2s mainly have been introduced in a way to enhance scalability. And we have layer 2s, for example, like Polygon, one of the most popular ones. We have Optimism, obviously. We have new ones to the market like Starknet. We have Arbitron. And of course, we have Lightning on the Bitcoin network, right? So we're going to jump into the benefits and the drawbacks of layer 1s versus the benefits and drawbacks of layer 2s. So from on the layer 1 side, of course, most times security is a major benefit, and most times this is going to be, I would say, attributable more to Bitcoin than to some of the other blockchains. So security for sure, decentralization for sure, having a trustless environment. In terms of drawbacks, we're talking about scalability issues, which we just touched on, and as well as limited smart contract functionality. And like I said before, that is mainly attributable to Bitcoin because Ethereum was introduced as the first major L1 with smart contract functionality. So that last point doesn't really it doesn't really hold for Ethereum, right? Now on the layer 2 side, right, we have the benefits obviously being scalability. It was introduced to enhance scalability on L1s, of course. As a result, lower transaction fees, faster transactions. Some of the drawbacks, security trade-offs, obviously, interoperability challenges, because now you have to make sure that one of the things we're going to touch on a little later, the consensus algorithm aligns with the L1 and the L2 that's being used. Of course, the risk of centralization in order to be able to manage some of the things like transaction fees and transaction time. You had to compromise on certain things like decentralization. So both L1s and L2s, as you see, they have their benefits. Obviously, they have their drawbacks, and it all depends on what you are trying to do. Now, most L2s, what they do is they batch transactions on the L2 layer, and then they reconcile them on the base layer when they have a certain number of transactions or a certain level of data space worth of transactions. They would then process one big transaction on the base layer, and that is how they are able to reduce the cost of interacting with the base layer, and of course be able to process transactions a lot faster. And like we were saying, one of the big areas that impact the ability of a layer 1 or layer 2 to be able to do the things that they want to do in terms of facilitating that blockchain trilemma has to do a lot with the consensus mechanism, right? So we all know that Bitcoin uses the proof of work consensus mechanism, which has obviously come in for a lot of licks because of obviously its high energy consumption or perceived high energy consumption. But the pros, robust security through obviously I expect the expenditure of computation work. You can't get around that. You have to have the computational power to be able to interact with and validate transactions on the blockchain. And this provides a significant security level, right? And a security layer. And it's one of the things that a lot of people truly trust about Bitcoin. You know, when you're talking about moving billions of dollars across the world without an intermediary, without with exact payment finality, you want to make sure that when you are transacting, it is being done as safe as possible. And as of today, 15 years later, Bitcoin has never missed a ticking block. You know, every 10 minutes a block is validated, right? And of course, as the network has grown, it has become one of the most decentralized platforms in the world, comparable with, for example, the internet, right? On the con side, like I said, high energy consumption, and also the potential for centralization due to mining pool centralization. So we know that there was a period where a lot of the mining pool concentration was in China. When China decided they were going to ban mining of Bitcoin, it did affect the hash rate associated with the platform. Obviously, that could have compromised the security of the platform. So even though it's a pull and tug, we still have to be cautious about, you know, sometimes it's more beneficial to plug into a mining pool to be able to get a share the rewards as compared to being your own individual mining rig setup, or having your mining rig setup attached to a mining pool as compared to trying to win blocks on your own. But ultimately we need to, you know, be cautious about how we allow the pooling of those mining operations, because it can ultimately create a risk towards the decentralization of the network. In terms of other consensus mechanisms, we have proof of stake, which obviously uses lower energy consumption, obviously faster transactions. This is something that Ethereum recently, well, within reason, switched to from proof of stake to from proof of work to proof of stake. And I think a big misconception during that whole transition is that a lot of people thought that in switching from proof of work to proof of stake, it will automatically mean a reduction in the fees. That did not happen. That was never one of the promises. But like I said, obviously the lower energy consumption, as it, that is very bullish for people who have a major concern with Bitcoin's energy consumption, people who want to make sure that their investments are green. And even though Bitcoin can use energy from any energy source, whether it be renewable, whether it be fossil fuel, whether it be electric, whether it be wind, whether it be hydro, a lot of people believe that, you know, there is the energy consumption is significant, and, you know, they don't attach a significant enough value to what the protocol does as yet to justify that. So obviously a lot of people were very excited to see Ethereum move to proof of stake. Some of the cons associated with that is that the security relies on the amount of tokens staked, right? So if you have a high amount of token stake, the network is pretty secure. But if people decide to start, or people stop seeing value in the token itself and stop staking the token, and there is one group or an individual who has a large stake pool, that person could basically now take control of validating transactions on the platform. So obviously, proof of stake compromises that. We see more and more that the institutions that control the larger stakes obviously are not directly aligned with the basic principles of why crypto was invented in the first place. So, it's something that can obviously create an issue going forward. The next thing is that, especially with crypto tokens or crypto protocols that have a fixed supply, the people who get in early and are able to control that supply and stake it early, they are going to have the same amount of control today as they're going to have 10 years from now, because unless they sell, no one else can start creating a space for themselves as a validator. So proof of stake can be, pretty tricky. Of course, a potential for centralization. A few entities control a large stake. Now, which is a kind of mirror mechanism to proof of stake, we have delegated proof of stake. So delegated proof of stake is where everyone who holds a token or stakes a token doesn't necessarily have an input, but they would assign or delegate their tokens to someone who would then vote on decisions on the protocol on their behalf, right? And of course, some of the pros, like I said, fast transaction speeds, scalability, of course, and the potential for decentralization, because these staking pools can operate from anywhere in the world. There could be as many of them as, well, within reason, and it allows for a level of decentralization. However, on the con side, with a limited number of nodes, it could lead to centralization. So let's say a protocol only allows 1,000 nodes total. Once you get to that 1,000, it's hard for anybody else to enter the space unless they are willing to, buy that space at a premium or something like that. So again, someone can potentially hold and control the protocol for forever, or for as long as they are interested, of course. And then obviously there's a reliance on a chosen set of delegates for block production and for securing the integrity of the network, of course, because from the time you've delegated to a particular delegate, you no longer have a vote, technically, right? You've now handed your vote over to them, right? And so it's so important to trust your delegates. And oftentimes there's not a lot of information in terms of, how do you make an assessment between one node versus the other, or one delegate versus the other. So it does create somewhat of a tricky situation, especially in new protocols, right? Then we have proof of authority. Proof of authority basically comes down to a chain of command, right? So basically it's fast transactions, obviously low energy consumption, but it is more suitable for private blockchains. So blockchains within organizations, obviously within organizations, there is a hierarchy. And based on those rules held within the organization, people have authority to validate transactions on the blockchain. But obviously, very centralized, relies heavily on reputation or authority of validators, can fall victim to a lot of the same bureaucratic problems that we run into in the traditional corporate space. So again, not really ideal for a public blockchain, but aligned with the principles of a private entity, private institution. There may be, significant value there, right, guys? Obviously, like I said, choosing the appropriate layer one and the appropriate proof of consensus mechanism on that layer one will impact heavily on how the layer two is able to scale, how the layer two is able to execute on its commitments, on its agenda as it relates to what it's trying to deliver on, whether it be fast transactions, whether it be security, whether it be scalability, whether it be trying to build out a decentralized structure. If the L1 associated with that L2 isn't able to deliver those things, or able to deliver on that thing that the layer 2 might be missing, then it puts the whole thing in a shit show, right? So I just thought it was important, because a lot of these terms we hear coming up, sometimes people come to me, I see people hit up the Crypto Caribbean page and ask, what does this mean? What does that mean? So I thought, especially as we come down to the tail end of season 4, I wanted to start touching on some of these things that we don't really talk about too consistently, and we don't really get into details about. So just a little bit of information for this evening. I hope you guys enjoyed your time with me. I enjoyed my time with you. If you are partying this weekend, again, be safe out there. Drink responsibly. Designate a driver if you are moving about, and be safe in this crypto space. We're gonna talk a lot more about conditions of the market, and we're gonna get into a lot about what is going on, especially in the Caribbean region next week. Have a very exciting show for you guys. So I wouldn't give anything away, but next week is gonna be fun. So in the meantime, in between time, guys, adoption is inevitable. Are you ready? Illuminati out. Be blessed. Love.